And how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, for the second consecutive year, defense was a name of the game for the Pro Football Hall of Fame classes. Julius Peppers, Dwight Freeney, Randy Gradishar, Steve McMichael, and Patrick Willis are five of the seven inductees into Canton. Devin Hester and Andre Johnson are also part of this class. And when you think about Julius Peppers as a defensive end, first overall pick rather, in the 2002 NFL draft to the Carolina Panthers, and we saw the freak athleticism for Julius Peppers collegiately at the University of North Carolina, both as a basketball player and, of course, as a defensive end for the Tar Heels. He transitioned nicely to the National Football League, 159 sacks, 159 and a half sacks to be exact, which are fourth all time. And I mean, again, Peppers was just a freak of nature. That's the best way to sum it up. Dwight Freeney and his spin moves led to him getting 125 and a half career sacks. And you think about Freeney coming out of Syracuse as a first round pick to the Indianapolis Colts. It didn't take him that long to make a name for himself defensively. And of course, the rest is history. Randy Gradishar, the 1978 NFL Defensive Player of the Year, and arguably the heart and soul of that famed Orange Crush defense of the Broncos of the late 1970s. You think about Lyle Alzado, you think about Tom Jackson, you also think about Randy Gradishar on that unit. Of course, they helped the Broncos get to Super Bowl 12. Steve Mongo McMichael, 95 career sacks, a big part of that famed 46 defense that led the Chicago Bears to winning Super Bowl number 20. And you think about Mongo on that defensive line, and he was as tough as they come. And now he's joining Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, and Dan Hampton in Canton from that Bears defense. And of course, the late great Walter Payton, the for some people still the greatest running back in NFL history. Also part of that team. He's in Canton as well. And then when you think about Mongo McMichael, this man played 15 years in the National Football League. And then after that, went on to become a pro wrestler and, of course, a famed member of the Four Horsemen. So you look at injuries to Patrick Willis, and of course, they cut down what was going to be a very promising career at middle linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. But in seven of Willis's 8 years with the Niners, he did make the Pro Bowl. He quickly built a reputation as being one of the best middle linebackers in the National Football League. Then, what can you say about Devin Hester that hasn't already been said? 19 punt or kickoff returns. And at the end of the day, Devin Hester was a game changer. And I mean, we have seen some great kick and punt returners in the National Football League over the years. You think about Deion Sanders, you think about Darrell Green, you think about Mel Gray, Eric Metcalf, just to name a few, Brian Mitchell as well. And then Devin Hester, to me, just took it to a whole nother level. I mean, this guy was a game changer because not only if you kick to him as far as his ability to take it to the house, but then on top of that, the field position that he created for the Bears offense by teams kicking away from him, whether they kicked the kickoff out of bounds, whether it was a short punt, it was an angled punt, whatever. And then you had some of those teams. You know what? We're going to go out there and kick the Devin Hester, and of course, Devin Hester made a lot of people pay. And it's one of those, I think, in this day and age, I think the panel, the voting, if you will, for the National Football, not for the National Football League, but the Pro Football Hall of Fame rather, has gotten better because we've seen guys that have made tremendous impacts on special teams, a la Ray Guy, the famed punter for the Raiders, getting in a couple of years ago. Devin Hester definitely deserved his spot in Canton. And then Andre Johnson, so many great years as a wide receiver with the Houston Texans, more than 14,000 career receiving yards, more than 1,000 receptions, 70 career touchdowns. And you just think about him because he played on some bad Texans teams. He also played on some good Texans teams as well. But nonetheless, on those bad Texans team, he was one of the few bright spots. And again, like I said, all seven of these men are more than deserving to be enshrined in Canton. Now, some guys out there who continue to get snubbed. I've talked about him before, and I will continue to talk about him. The late Marty Schottenheimer, his 200 career wins as a head coach are eighth all time, but his 5-13 record in the postseason continues to haunt him. And you think about Marty Schottenheimer, got things turned around for the Cleveland Browns as their head coach, got them to the AFC Championship game multiple times. What he did to revitalize the Kansas City Chiefs during the 1990s. And then, of course, his run with the San Diego Chargers. But unfortunately, people look at his 5-13 mark. But at the end of the day, in my book, Marty Schottenheimer deserves to be in Canton. Another late head coach, Dan Reeves, his 190 career wins are 10th all time. And you think about it, Dan Reeves took three different teams to the postseason: the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, and the Atlanta Falcons. And then in the case of the Broncos and the Falcons, he got them both to the Super Bowl. Now, Dan Reeves is 0-4 in the Super Bowl. And in my opinion, I think that is hovering over the fact that he is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But nonetheless, Chuck, pardon me, not I almost said Chuck Noll. Please forgive me. Chuck Noll was 4-0. Bud Grant, of the late Bud Grant, who coached the Minnesota Vikings for so many years. He lost four Super Bowls. He was 0-4 in the Super Bowl, as was former Buffalo Bills head coach Marv Levy. They're both in Canton. I really do believe, and I'm not taking anything away from either one of those two gentlemen because they were both phenomenal head coaches. I'm just saying Dan Reeves deserves his spot in Canton as well. Speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, I will continue to talk about it being an atrocity that Jim Marshall is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, this guy was the Iron Man of the National Football League in an era, a tough nose era of the 60s and 70s. So many games for the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, a member of that famed Purple People Eaters front for the Vikings. And you think about it, Carl Eller is already in the Hall of Fame off of that defensive line, as is Alan Page. Jim Marshall definitely is deserving of a spot in Canton. You think about the logjam at defensive end right now. You got some good guys out there that deserve to get their names called, and I think they will sooner rather than later. Leslie O'Neal, John Abraham, Jared Allen, and then I'm going to go old school here a little bit with Al Bubba Baker and Coy Bacon. And Al Bubba Baker, the younger generation might not know about him, but this guy put up some phenomenal years as a pass rusher. His rookie year with the Detroit Lions, he had 23 sacks. Of course, that was before the sack became an official stat in the National Football League. Speaking of guys that played in the 1970s, L.C. Greenwood, I've talked about him before, the famed defensive end for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you think about that steel curtain defense that has sent multiple guys to Canton already. Of course, Joe Green. You've got Jack Lambert, and Jack Ham at linebacker, and of course, Mel Blount at cornerback. LC Greenwood was a bad dude. And if anybody, wants to go back and watch the games, LC was a big part of the Steelers' success from the 1970s. I talked about the logjam at defensive end. There's also a logjam at wide receiver. Some guys in this generation that definitely deserve a spot. Steve Smith Sr., so many great years with the Carolina Panthers, and then, of course, with the Baltimore Ravens. Reggie Wayne. What can you say about him? You're looking at other guys from that Colts offense, a la Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning, that are already in there. Dwight Freeney's about to go in. You think about the success that the Indianapolis Colts had in that era. you don't have that success without Reggie Wayne, one of the best number two receivers playing off of Marvin Harrison in the NFL at that time. And speaking of number two receivers, you look at Torrey Big Game Holt. He was a first round pick of the St. Louis Rams in the late 90s, of course, was a part of the greatest show on turf when they won the Super Bowl in the 1999 season. We've seen Isaac Bruce get his spot in Canton. Of course, the same can be said for Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk, as well as offensive tackle Orlando Pace. It's only a matter of time before Torrey Holt gets his name inducted into Canton. And then another former Rams receiver going back to their days in LA. And I'm talking about Henry Ellard. Henry Ellard in the 1980s, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, put up some big time seasons for the Los Angeles Rams, playing with another big name receiver at that point for the Rams and Flipper Anderson. And I don't think that people, might remember how good that Rams offense was in those days with Jim Everett at quarterback. And then, of course, Flipper Anderson and Henry Ellard at wide receiver. Another guy who, I think people are overlooking is Leroy Glover. 83 and a half career sacks as a defensive end. He had 17 in 2000 for the New Orleans Saints. And if you go back and watch Leroy Glover play from the defensive tackle position, that guy was a man's man. That's the only way to say it. A guy who got a first time snub, and that's former San Diego Chargers tight end Antonio Gates. You think about Antonio Gates, and I mean, he was one of those guys. Of course, a lot of people remember uh, Tony Gonzalez coming in as a former basketball player and what he did for so many years with the Kansas City Chiefs and then the Atlanta Falcons at tight end. Antonio Gates put up some big time seasons for the Chargers, and I think he is definitely deserving of a spot in Canton. Another guy that I think deserves a spot is Rodney Harrison. He's 30 career sacks, 30 career interceptions, was an enforcer at the safety position. I think what's going to hurt him and what has hurt him is the fact that, some people viewed him as a dirty player and he only made two Pro Bowl selections because of that. But I think Rodney Harrison was a big time player. Of course, many years playing on bad Chargers teams, but then he was able to get into the spotlight more playing with the New England Patriots. You think about it, his first year with the Patriots, he helped them win a Super Bowl. His first 2 years with the Patriots, he helped them win Super Bowls. As a matter of fact, in Super Bowl 39, the victory over the Philadelphia Eagles, Rodney Harrison had two interceptions in that game and could have easily had three. But then you look ahead to next year, some guys that are going to be on the ballot for the first time. Former New York Giants quarterback Eli Manning, former Carolina Panthers linebacker Luke Kuechly, former Baltimore Ravens offensive lineman Marshall Yanda, former Seattle Seahawks safety Earl Thomas, former New England Patriots and Indianapolis Colts place kicker Adam Vinatieri, former San Francisco 49ers old offensive tackle Joe Staley, former Green Bay Packers edge rusher Clay Matthews III, and then, of course, former Baltimore Ravens outside linebacker Terrell Suggs. I think there are going to be several guys that I just mentioned that do get their names called the first time around. I think Adam Vinatieri gets in. You think about the kicking position, and you really haven't seen too many kickers and punters, of course, get their names called for induction into Canton. But you think about Adam Vinatieri, and you make a name for yourself in the National Football League in January and February. And you think about his career with the New England Patriots. Of course, he was on that Patriots team that lost to the Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl 31. But then several years later, that kick in the snow in the divisional round to beat the Oakland Raiders. Then a couple of weeks after that, in Super Bowl number 36, the kick to help give the Patriots their first Lombardi Trophy. Then, after so many big kicks, over the years of the Patriots going to the Indianapolis Colts and helping them win a championship, a four-time Super Bowl champion, I think Adam Vinatieri is definitely deserving, and I think he gets the call first time around. I think the same could be said for Joe Staley. with what he did at the offensive tackle position. It was kind of like 1 and 1A at the time, in my opinion, as far as who was the best offensive tackle in the National Football League at that time, between Joe Staley and, of course, Joe Thomas, the former Cleveland Browns offensive tackle, who is now in Canton. I think Terrell Suggs, first time around, does get in my opinion. You think about those famed Baltimore Ravens defenses. Ed Reed is already in there. Ray Lewis is already in there. And I think T Sizzle will definitely be joining them soon. Luke Kuechly, very interesting because, Kuechly was another guy who retired, early because of the injuries. And he was working on a Hall of Fame career. Will he get in? We got to wait and see. If Marshall Yanda does not get in next year, I don't think he has to wait that long. And then very interesting to see how the panel views Eli Manning. 117 and 117, his career record as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, a career completion percentage of just a little bit over 60. He threw for more than 57,000 yards, but then he was a four-time Pro Bowler, but then he was also a two-time Super Bowl champion, beat Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl. And of course, people are always going to remember those two game winning drives late in the fourth quarter by Eli to help the Giants beat the New England Patriots. So it's going to be very interesting uh, to see how the committee, holds that up, if you will, in comparison to other players. So I mentioned the first time guys who have the best chance to get in. It's going to be interesting to see who else gets in if the veteran committee decides to put somebody in as well. But like I said, the seven gentlemen that are going into Canton this year are more than deserving. Kudos. It's one of those, honestly, you know, all seven of those guys are going to be honored prior to kickoff tomorrow night in Vegas for Super Bowl number 58. It's one of those where the Niners or Chiefs could sign Devin Hester up right now, and I think he could get him like 50 yards on a kickoff return. That's how dangerous he was. Of course, Patrick Willis is going to get a lot of love from the Niner fans that are in attendance. But nonetheless, all seven of those guys were deserving. It's going to be very interesting to see and hear their respective speeches come this summer at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And like I said, let's see who's going to get the call for 2025. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.